Welcome back to the second part of this week's entertainment show. Before the break, we spoke to Sophie Guest, who is appearing on the hit TV show Dim on Channel Amazon Prime, dealing with the whole issue of 1950s America, racism, horror, all mixed into one. And our second part of looking at TV series coming out in Ireland in this coming month. We now look to a program called the Mare of Easttown, which is premiering here in Ireland on Channel Sky Atlantic. We're delighted to be joined by one of the stars of the show, Julianne Nicholson, who plays the character Laurie Ross. And Julianne, I saw the trailer for the Mare of Easttown and sort of such, and we see Kate Winslet play the role of Marie Sheehan in terms of this sort of high school sort of basketball sort of star, sort of turn detective. It's a sort of a crime thriller with a sort of a twist. Is it really sort of a show that it sort of brings you along with sort of that suspense and unwind? You're sort of trying to guess the plot as you go along?
Definitely. When I read, it's a mini series. There are 7 episodes, and when I read the episodes, at the end of each one, I was convinced I knew who had done it. And each time, that idea was flipped on its head. So I think they base it in a part of Pennsylvania called Delco. It's outside of Philadelphia, and it's a small town where everyone has known everyone for decades. And so they were hoping, and I think we have succeeded in coming from a really character-driven story of all these interconnections within that town. And then this terrible crime happens, and everyone has to sort of come together. Many have secrets, and it's sort of plucking those secrets out and trying to figure out the whodunit aspect.
And as a sport, you mentioned that sort of close sort of town, sort of community, and I suppose you really in those sort of towns, you sort of get your sort of closed environments where people say it can't be them or it can't be that. The sort of guess game goes in sort of innuendo in terms of that. But it probably goes to show this sort of twist that you're getting, that no one really knows their neighbours or no one really knows what goes on behind closed doors of a family house.
I think that's right. Yeah, we all have ideas about what other people are doing in their lives, but we really have no idea. And so with each episode, things come into light. And I think it's still, though, it's pretty surprising how they wrap it up. And it's I think they've done a really good job of keeping everyone guessing.
And Julianne, you played the character Laurie Ross, and we've seen in the trailers a bit about Kate Winslet's character Marie Sheehan in terms of that. You maybe enlighten our viewers and listeners about your character Laurie Ross. What's her role in this sort of town? What's her sort of background? What's her sort of career? What sort of role does she play in this sort of town and community?
Yeah, well, as you say, it's called Mare of Easttown, and Kate plays Mare, and we've grown up there together. We've been best friends since we were in diapers, and we were stars on the local basketball team, and they've been best friends for all this time. Mare is the detective of the town. Laurie Ross is her best friend. She's a teacher, but she's also primarily a wife and mother. But she's Mare's support system. She's Mare's place to laugh, to confess, to just relax, be herself. Mare is grieving the death of her son. She lives with her mother, played by the brilliant Jean Smart, and her daughter, Angourie Rice. And she has a pretty heavy burden. So Laurie is the person that she goes to unload all of that and just to remember the good old days.
And I suppose, Julianne, you mentioned there where the sort of town is gripped by a killing. And we know these sort of dreadful scenarios happen in towns all over the world. Is this sort of killing so gruesome that it sort of catches the demons of these sorts of characters that you just can't let it go? It's on people's minds in terms of what that horrific event in terms of, is the whole sort of show centered around that sort of incident?
It is. That something happens pretty pretty terrible in the first episode, and then it's unraveling that. But you find out actually that there's another girl who had gone missing a year prior.
So we put a serial killer on the loose.
Figure out. Say that again.
So it opens the possibility of a serial killer on the loose.
Right. It's trying to figure out if those two things are connected, and how could it happen? So everyone's on edge and on high alert as to what could have possibly happened and if this will happen again.
And Julianne, in terms of the shooting of the show of Mare of Easttown, in terms of, I mean, I asked Sophie just before the break in terms of Dim, in terms of had COVID hit in terms of their sort of production, and had they sort of finished up the wrap and the sort of shoot. She said they just barely sort of got over the line, maybe last. What was it sort of similar? Was it similar for ye in terms of your sort of production shoot on the Mare of Easttown, or what was the scenario like?
We had been shooting for about 4 or 5 months, actually. We were coming up to the end of the shooting, and it is 7 episodes, but we shot it as if it were one piece. Okay. We had one director, and so we were shooting some scenes from episode 7 early on, and vice versa, the scenes from the first or second scene towards the end of production. So we had about a month to go when COVID hit and shut down. And I feel grateful that we had that amount of time together, because there was a comfort and a trust that we all had with each other, both cast and crew, so that when we did have to come back and take off our masks and be, in a closer proximity with people, we felt like HBO and WIP, the production company, really took that seriously. And there was testing every day and double masks and keeping distance, and people sat outside because at that point the weather was nice again in Philadelphia. And we felt like, I think in September, that we're all coming back together. So it was challenging and weird, but you just kind of make do.
Yeah, and I suppose, Julianne, we see with the sort of these sort of mini episode sort of series, it opens up the possibility in terms of maybe finishing on a cliffhanger, but not really sort of closing the sort of book on the story as well. And is that the real sort of case with the Mare of Easttown as well, that it opens up the possibility, or are we going to see I know you're not going to give anything away as sort of such, but are we going to see all our questions being answered there?
I think all of your questions will be answered. And I think that it's a pretty closed book at the end of the series, but, I mean, nothing's, never say never, but I would suspect that this is, you can enjoy it knowing that it's 7 parts and then on to something else.
And Julianne, you mentioned the Mare of Easttown, and you mentioned your own character. What was the audition process like for you landing the role of Laurie Ross? Was it? Did you have to send in tape? Obviously, it wasn't before tape, so you obviously auditioned in person. So in terms of that, was it sort of a rigorous sort of 2 or 3 callbacks, or?
No, actually, I didn't have that. I have. Well, first of all, it's a wonderful casting director named Avi Kaufman, who I've known for many, many years in New York. And Kate was already, she's an executive producer and is the lead of the show. And I've known Kate for many years. Mm-hmm. My husband is her son's godfather, and she was at our wedding, and we have quite an extensive history with each other. And so she actually called me and said, I'm doing this show, there's this role, will you come do it too? Yeah. And I said, yes. I've been a huge fan of hers for far before I met her, and I just think she's one of the best. So to get to be in scenes with her was a real thrill.
And I suppose, Julianne, time is nearly catching up with us. So I'm just going to turn it over to your character, Laurie Ross, for the last 30 seconds. And she might enlighten our listeners and our viewers why they should tune in and watch the Mare of Easttown here in Ireland in Sky Atlantic.
I think that watching Mare of Easttown will give you an inside look into small town Northeast America. I think that there are really interesting characters that you will fall in love with, and as well as a crime that will just keep you guessing every step of the way.
Okay. On that note, Julianne Nicholson, it's been a pleasure talking to you today.
Thanks, yeah.
As we look ahead in joyful anticipation for the release of the Mare of Easttown here on Channel Sky Atlantic here in Ireland. And we look forward to seeing your role of Laurie Ross, and we look forward to seeing you, hopefully, please God, in many more projects for the rest of 2021 and onto the future. But for the moment, Julianne Nicholson, stay safe, stay well, and God bless.
Thanks, Jim. You too.